I am joined today by Michael Smith, a security and operations leader based in Dallas, Texas. Welcome, Michael. Thank you for joining us on Cyber Talks today.
Good morning. Thank you, and happy to be here.
Amazing. And you've got some furry friends in the background that I am pumped about. So we'll see if they make a full appearance or not. You're probably mortified, and I am loving this right now.
Yeah, I got a little photo bomber right here. So yeah, we'll see if they maintain their quiet. So
I love it. Well, in the post-pandemic world, remember the BBC interview where the expert got interrupted? Like, this is totally okay these days. So
yeah.
Don't even worry about it. I love it.
Yep.
Well, we've known each other for a couple of years. We spent some time together while you were a customer of eSentires, not only through our customer advisory board, but I was actually your executive sponsor within our relationship. So I got to know you pretty well. And I was really wanting to have you on eSentire Cyber Talks because you've had such an incredible career. And I think that you take a really unique approach to mentorship, to learning and development, and just to planning that our overall audience could learn a lot from. So I'm really excited to dive into your background and share a little bit with everybody here today.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm when you say an incredible career, and when I look back on it, I realize I've been very blessed. And it's funny because, to me, it's just been a career. But again, when I look back on everything, and then I really think about the people and the teams I've been able to work with, that's really what's made it tremendous, right? That's what's really been able to allow me to grow and then to, in essence, teach me how to help others kind of do the same thing. So yeah, I'm happy to go through and happy to explore it with you.
Well, let's start all the way at the very beginning. So you started your career out in the Air Force. Give us a little bit of the why. What was it that led you into a career of service? And what did you gain from that when it started to build your career as an IT professional?
Yeah, so I grew up, in a house of a lot of military experience, right? So, my uncle was in the Army, my grandfather was in World War II and the Korean War, and I grew up around a culture of service, right? And it was just something that was understood. I had several cousins that would do various flavors. My older brother was a Marine, so never ever going to live up to his expectations. Almost disowned me when he found out I wanted to join the Air Force, but. Yeah, so I joined the Air Force, when I was when I was 18, and I spent several years there. Really, really enjoyed it. I was a security police officer, and so even within the military, and so the joke in the Air Force is that the security police, in essence, is the military branch of the Air Force, right? Everybody else is your administrative, type tasks, mechanics, etc. But so even within that, I found the discipline, if you will. I really gravitated towards that. And I think that's something that's really helped me throughout my career, in essence, to, being on time, right? Being respectful of people's time, understanding what your commitments, when you say your commitments, and then actually adhering to that and following through and kind of what your word means to you. So, yeah, I think those were really pivotal points in time, and then I look back on that, I spent, 6 months in Saudi Arabia in 1995. And I was 19 years old, right? And I was too young to understand the situation I was in, but at the same time, like I said, I grew during those time periods as a person, and probably really formative years from a leadership perspective.
Amazing. Well, thank you for your service. Absolutely. And
Well,
that's
thank you.
pretty incredible. There are people on this listening to this right now going 1995, 19 and aging you. So be warned.
Yeah, I have to be careful about throwing out too many dates. So I
Don't throw out
figured
the
the
dates.
gray,
Don't let them know. It's
yeah, I figured the
okay.
gray and white hair would do that more than anything. But
There you go. Well, when you entered the Air Force and were going through your experience, did you have IT as a future career destination already, or was that something you uncovered through your experience?
Yeah, I really didn't. And I that's one of the gotchas. Like, I wish I would have understood that I had lots of IT experience, in essence, just growing up, right? So I grew up in the time period of the Commodore 64, dating myself again, and so, I bought as a nerd, a young nerd when I was 16 years old, I bought my first 486 computer to play video games. And so, when I went into the military, I didn't look for jobs where I could leverage that, where I probably should have done that. So I, but what I realized very quickly is that I could get out of a lot of the more menial tasks. It was, hey, go stand guard out here on a freezing cold, tundra, or, oh, you can work on spreadsheets and you know what databases are? Fantastic. Well, you can help us do that. And so I kind of learned to leverage those skill sets, probably later on. So I would just say, yeah, kind of one of the things is understand where your skill sets lie. Maybe I didn't really have it even as a passion at that point, but I certainly learned to use that to, like I said, to kind of get out of the more undesirable tasks.
Mhm. Interesting. And when you finished your time with the Air Force, you had a number of more kind of like analyst, administrative, manager roles in IT. But I would say from just, reading your background and knowing a bit about you, your career really accelerated during your time at Jacobs. And can you tell us a little bit about what it was like taking on international assignment and even finding your way in such a large scale organization?
Yeah, certainly. So to back up just a bit, right? So I mean, I did, and I think this is something I've always kind of worn as a badge of honor, right? Is that I literally started out in IT working at a company that made explosives for the petrochem industry for oil and gas. And again, I actually worked on a press that was making these explosives that would go down into like an oil well and perforate the well. And after seeing several people, kind of the artifacts of these little micro explosions, and I was like, ooh, you know what? I can do IT. And so, I remember running around a plant vacuuming out explosive powder from inside PC cases, right? I mean, that was one of my first jobs, right? And so, over the years, I've done pretty much every job within IT, right? From desktop support, network administration, server administration, application administration. And so I think some of that and then understanding what happens in those roles, that really did help me. And so when I joined Jacobs, it was a regional support type of a role, managing primarily assets in the United States. And then, so 2007, so actually Jacobs had acquired the company that I worked for. And I started to move into a much larger role. And that's when I really started to get that international exposure, and understanding, how to support remote teams, right, where we don't have anybody and kind of what the knowledge level is there. Um, and then in 2014, I was actually privileged to chosen for an assignment to Ireland, which was just phenomenal. And so, in amongst the technology portion, got thrown in from a cultural perspective of living in another country, right, with my wife and son, my 10-year-old son at the time. And so, yeah, that was just an experience all its own.
Amazing. And what would you say led to making you successful in navigating such a large organization? Was it, having that vast array of experience in IT? Was it your security chops? What was it exactly?
Yeah. So I think in especially in a really large organization, there's a lot of need, right? And just being open to new opportunities and being vocal about it, right? Is I've never had the attitude of that's not my job, or I don't want to do that, right? And even if I didn't want to do it, it was something like it needs to be done. Hey, I don't know what I'm doing here. I've never done it before, but I'm happy to take it on, right? And what I found is that through those types of opportunities, I just grew tremendously, because once people around you realize that's the ilk of your character, is they're like, oh, hey, well, what about this, right? And I think too, a big piece of that is, and this happened quite a bit with the Ireland assignment, is being okay with doing things that stretch you, right? Not, going, ooh, that's a little scary and I've never done that before and that's really outside of my wheelhouse, but understanding that, but no, I can do that, right? And then getting into the role even before you understand what you're doing, right? And but being just having the ability to do those stretch assignments, I think was super important in a large company. So
I think that speaks volumes to who you've become as a leader too, because when you take that approach, you're willing to put yourself out there, you're willing to fail, but you're excited to learn.
yeah.
You instill that in your team. And I
Yeah,
think you've
and
showed
I think
people,
I think a big piece of that too is going into that with a very humble attitude,
yeah,
right? And just saying, "Hey,
great.
look," and then when you fail, is being completely transparent and honest about it. And so I've spoken in front of many boards where I will be bluntly honest, and I will communicate risks or things that I think we need to be focusing on. And I think what that does immediately is that disarms the environment, right? And it's like, okay, look, if something goes wrong, this person's going to tell us that
They're
thing is wrong.
solutioning. Yeah.
Right, and they're going to provide, and that's another thing I would also say is in your career, don't ever present a challenge or a problem and just lay it out there on the table without having a solution to that, right? And so I think that was really key, I think, in being able to progress in a company like that as well.
Amazing. Well, as you've seen your progression scale through Jacobs, then you did make a change and you joined HKS, so a global architecture firm. I always found it incredible to hear the story of how they were responsible for the build at SoFi Stadium and some of the unbelievable properties around the world that you were able to be a part of those projects on. And in that, in that environment, you scaled your career again. You were a VP, you were CISO, named CIO recently. And I guess when we think about that change and that vision, what was it that led to you joining HKS?
Yeah, so I think working in a large environment, rather large company of 60,000 people, um, I had a small portion of accountability for that environment, and so really, the opportunity for HKS specifically was really to have accountability for the entire portfolio, and that was what was really attractive to one, to have that influence, to have again level of accountability, and really able to affect positive change. And man, in my time there, like you said, that was such amazing projects. I mean, working around individuals, the creativity, and I think my level of creative thinking grew in that environment, just being around people that were vastly more creative than I was, right? And so I think that's maybe another takeaway is that make sure you surround yourself with people that are more talented than you are, right? If you're ever in a room and you think you're the most talented person in that room, get out of it as quick as you can, right? Because you're not going to grow in that environment. Two, you're probably on a pedestal and getting ready to get knocked down. you know, um, but yeah, I think, and I always took just a great amount of pride in speaking about our book of work and what the firm was able to accomplish from a design perspective. So.
And did you feel a transition as you moved from IT centric operations into security specific operations? Because at HKS, I believe you held both roles and both parts of the oversight. So was it a difficult transition to take on the security component?
Yeah, I think so. When I was at Jacobs, I saw an environment that was heavily delineated, right? So you had security and you had, in essence, a conventional IT, and they didn't really have a good symbiotic relationship between it. It was a lot of I'm gonna see something, I'm gonna throw it over the wall for the other group to take care of. Okay, I've done a task, I'm gonna throw it back over and see if they see anything else. And so I think when I took that on at HKS, I really had a desire to, and we were a small team, and so we had to, had many people wore many hats, and so I had a desire to say, look, I want the IT portion of this house, the house, to really understand the why behind from a security perspective. Why are we doing these things, right? Because some of these things seem like they're onerous in when I'm cleaning up a specific task, right? But if I understand the why and what we're doing to protect and to reduce risk in that environment, I'm more apt then to do the incremental effort required to really secure that environment. And then in that small environment, we all kind of had an agreement with each other is that if anybody realized that we were making decisions because the work was easier and it wasn't the right thing to do, that we would immediately split security out from the rest of the tasks, and we would delineate that and give that separate management chain, everything. But I think over the course of those several years, we were really able to step out of that and be able to make decisions based upon from a secure posture, irregardless of the amount of work it was going to take on the infrastructure side to actually execute that.
Nice. And during your time as a security leader there, what were some of your biggest priorities? Were you focused on consolidation? Were you focused on reducing risk? You mentioned what was it that you were really giving the mandate to your team to prioritize?
Yeah. So it was really building out the overall security program, the overall security ecosystem, and shoring that up, right? So we had, 6 to 8 people that were doing things, maybe third and fourth hat, and they were doing it well between 8 and 5, Monday through Friday. And so it was very difficult, in essence, for them to juggle some of those responsibilities, right? And so when eyes got on a problem, that problem got fixed immediately. But I think getting eyes on that problem was always a challenge. And so, one of the things we did is we did a lot of policy, we did a lot of explanations, right? We did a lot of kind of, again, explaining the why, and really socializing that with our business partners. Why are we doing the things that we're doing? Why is it important? And how can you help us, right? So instead of having a team of 3, it's a team of, whatever, 1,600 people in the company that are all thinking from a security conscious mindset, and then helping to feed that back into the program.
Yeah, we're seeing so much of that cross business or cross departmental business line interaction start to become more and more of how we partner with organizations. So jumping to partnership, because I think that's something that I'd really love to hear from you on. How did you make that decision? One, when you started your security leadership journey at HKS, were you already engaged, or was the firm engaged with a services provider, or how did you choose to initially outsource to a third party provider?
Yeah, so we realized, probably within the first 2 or 3 months, we realized where our gaps were, and our gaps were really centered around. We had a lot of good tools. We had some tools that they're not being leveraged properly, right? And so we had to shed that from a cost perspective. Again, resourcing and labor was really an issue, and so we realized that we needed to kind of look outside. And what's funny is that I initially we were the only term I knew was MSSP, and I didn't know anything about MDR. And so I went to a value-added reseller that we were working with on some other projects, and I just kind of threw it up in the air. I said, "Hey, do you know anybody that could help us from a security perspective?" And it was really that easy of a question, in essence, right? But that easy of a question posed to the right entity, right? The right person or the right group that had that. Um, and so, yeah, it was early 2018 or mid 2018. We started up an RFP for, at that time, MSSP services, and that's kind of how we were introduced to the MDR service that we ended up choosing and then partnering with over the next 6 years.
Amazing. And one of the things I think is so interesting is there's often the expectation of what you want. You wanted to shore up a security posture. You wanted help with security. And when you think back now to what you've learned over that time and over the relationship, what were some of the specific areas of expertise you were looking for? Were you looking for response? Were you looking for threat hunting? Like, what was it, and from an outcomes perspective, that if you were to do it again, you would say, I want this?
Yeah. So I can tell you honestly, when we engaged initially in 2018, we didn't know what we wanted. Because we knew what we were doing, and we knew where that would maybe marry up to what best practices were. But as far as putting a requirements document together to say we want incident response within this time frame, and we want endpoint within this, and co-managed SIM and this, we didn't. I could put that all together today, but I think that was one of the things that I really enjoyed about the process, and I did say enjoyed about the process of kind of onboarding specifically, is having someone come in and say, look, here is, from an industry, from a security perspective, here's where the major focus points are, and here's where we can help with those major focus points. But then also there was some flexibility in that. If I said, well, but we have a specific solution or product that you're not supporting today, right? And at the time, there wasn't oh, well, sorry, we can't help you there. It was, okay, well, let's help to tailor that solution then and into what you're comfortable with, right? Let's dovetail that with the services that we are providing. And then thankfully, it wasn't more than a year later, I think, that service then was supported. And then so we kind of moved on. So, yeah, I would say if you know exactly what you want, then that's great, right? You know that you want SIM and you want IDS and all these different tools, in essence, that you're wanting help co-managing. But even if you don't know what those things are, it's still okay to engage and say, hey, can you help me understand what I don't know?
Yeah. Would you say, were there service intangibles, whether it be intelligence, whether it be pure support, that were of real value to you over your tenure?
Certainly, I think specifically that having that response, right? Having that so the SOC, right? Being able to not even, hey, look, you're going to alert on something and do something about it. Fantastic, great. But how about hey, I just happened upon something that I don't know what it is, and I need more help understanding what that is. Having that resource and then being able to have my staff have that resource that they can just send an email to or pick up the phone and call and say, hey, you didn't alert on this, but it's a thing that like we had an executive one time that swore they saw that their camera light came on. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. And so I sent a message to the SOC, said exactly what the machine was and what happened. Within about an hour and a half, I had a verbose explanation. Hey, look, we did this investigation. We looked at this machine. We looked at all these different pieces of telemetry. We didn't see anything that would be nefarious on it. And then the icing on the cake is they came back and they said, I thought this was cool. They said, but if you'll tell us the exact model of that camera, we'll be happy to go look and see if there's any specific IOCs that have to do with that camera that we may not have caught through the Windows logging, which I just thought that was like way above and beyond, way above and beyond anything that I would have even thought to go look at that, right? So I just having that extra set of hands and comfort, honestly, that hey, if it's I love it when someone calls me at 2 in the morning because that means they're looking at something when I'm sleeping.
So during your time at HKS, we got to know each other through the customer advisory board and also through executive sponsorship. And so I know how important mentorship is to you and has been in your career. Can you give us some examples of why that's important, or what role did that play in helping you advance over the course of your career?
Yeah, you know, I probably did the first 10 years of my career feeling like if I didn't have the answers, I wasn't going to tell anybody I didn't have the answers.
Fake it till you make
I wanted to
it.
puff up and really give the best image of myself, right? And so I think, I learned, I had a leader at Jacobs, and that I learned from that it was okay to say, I don't know, right? And it was actually a strength, right? Because guess what? They know when you don't know anyway. And they know that you're posturing. And so I think once I learned that it was okay to show that vulnerability and to say, hey, I really love the way that you did that. Can you help me understand what you're doing there? Or maybe engage in more formal mentorship, right? And more of a, hey, we're going to meet weekly and we're going to go through these things and have a relationship. And it's okay for you to tell me, hey, Mike, you talk too much, or you need to keep your answers more brief, or quit saying or what, I mean, silly things like that. But I learned to be very strategic at times from different people throughout my career. So I would always say that, I've probably always in a state of having one or two people that I would consider as mentors. Um, and then what was really kind of cool, so I had a situation about a year ago, is I had a person reach out to me that I did not know that had seen me speak at an event, and they wanted some help with technology strategy and kind of road mapping in their organization. Because and when I talked to this individual, I actually ended up talking to two people, and we did a great 1 hour Zoom meeting. And I realized in that Zoom meeting that now I was the mentor and they were the mentee. And that was really the first time in my career that I'd ever had that happen. And I really, really enjoyed that. I enjoyed being able to then give back. And if I'm being honest, there was a little portion of me that was like, wait a second, I'm not ready to mentor someone. like like you mean I have things that I can train. And I think once you realize that you have a lot of value that you can impart to people. Honestly, I think we have a duty to do that. I don't think we can keep that learning in. I think we have to, as professionals and technologists and, just human beings, I think we have a duty to pay that forward.
Oh, I love that. Oh, interesting. Thank you for sharing that. I'm curious, when you talk about, well, it's kind of a perfect segue. When you talk about accountability, you talk about duty. There's a lot been made of the responsibility of the security leader and the responsibility of a CISO in particular. We've seen that with regulation in specific industries. And I'm curious, you've held both seats, looking at CISO, looking at CIO. What were some of the biggest differences that you truly saw in the roles?
Yeah, I think CIO has traditionally held more weight with a board or with a C level or with an organization, right? It's more of an established role. Um, I think CISO is making its way there quickly. Unfortunately, I think too many organizations are having to suffer losses or breaches before they are able to recognize that importance. And so I think that's a shift I think we're starting to see is people are kind of waking up to the importance of security and how important it is to have that seat at the board in essence and a trusted advisor as scary as some of the stories are about things that can happen to companies, but then to be proactive in those regards and say, look, we're going to do what's right before we have, something that is going to, force us to go do right. So, and like I said, I think, I was a CISO before I was the CIO. Um, and I did see that. I did see, thankfully, the organization I was a part of really took security to heart, and they understood the importance of that. And so, but I could see it within different peers within the industry that they'd say, "Oh, you actually talk to the board?" They're like, "Yeah, we've never talked to the board." And I'm like, "Oh, wow, yeah, we have great conversations," and I try to be as blunt as I can with them about the risks facing the firm. But
Absolutely. And so your opinion, therefore, is there one, CISO should have board level accountability, or where do
100%.
you feel like that reporting structure should be even at the C-suite
Yeah,
level?
no, 100%. I think it should have board level reporting capabilities. It really should be outside of the traditional information technology chain. But I will also say, but it should be closely partnered with the other technology groups, right? Is that, I do understand building some delineation from a reporting perspective, but there should be a symbiotic relationship, right? It should be, hey, look, we're sharing the same logging sources, and when we're doing investigations, we're empowering each team in order to leverage, because what you don't want to happen is you don't want to happen again, it's from an accountability perspective. You don't want someone to go, oh, well, you asked me to do this specific scan, and so that's what I did. Now I'm going to sit on my hands until you tell me to do something else. You want that other entity, because I'll tell you, the number of times in my career that I've found things wrong in an environment has been because I was looking around in that environment, not because some system told me that something was wrong and then I went to go look at it. So I think you have to have that incremental effort on both sides of the aisle.
So when you have that seat at the table and you're actively presenting to the board as a CISO, what does that look like in terms of helping them understand value? It's a very technical operation, obviously. You're dealing in dollars and cents and business outcomes at the board level. How do you balance those two as the CISO?
Yeah, so I think there's two stages to that, right? So the first stage is you're presenting risk, right? You're presenting the risk, and you have to try, if you can put dollars to that risk, great. But I think you have to be careful of that too, right? Because sometimes we start doing things with soft dollars, and a mitigated event is going to save you X number of dollars, right? And sometimes that doesn't translate and that doesn't resonate with people. But I think if you can assess the risk, right, and be very transparent about that, what that risk is, how how you can put pieces in to mitigate that. But then also, once you've done that and once you've communicated that, is then start to tie those cyber programs into the business goals, right? So we have a goal of maybe your company has a goal of acquisition and they want to grow by a certain percent every year in their industry. Well, having a really strong M&A profile or an M&A, a way to bring companies in and ensure that they're secure, right, is super important. And so in that instance, you want something that's highly replicable. I'm going to do the exact same thing every time. I'm going to go in, I'm going to do all these things. It's going to create some type of a scorecard that then I can maybe even pre-decision bring that information to you and go, hey, look, whether you want it or not, here's what I think from an M&A perspective. Great, great on the cyber, and we're not going to be assuming risk here. Or, hey, it's an absolute mess, and I think in order, before you make a decision, you need to weigh these factors and understand that there's going to be a significant cost incurred once you do this in order to shore these things up. But man, once you start achieving that, now you're at that business enabler level, right? So I do think there's definitely two parts to that question.
Yeah, that you've basically made the cybersecurity programmatic at that point. You've kind of set the expectation and you're rolling out a sequence of initiatives or evaluation every time. When you first started to define cyber risk for your board, how difficult was that? Like, did it take multiple iterations? Did it take a score? Did it take a mutually agreed definition? What was that
Yeah,
like?
it probably took at least a year, and it was not just give a presentation, wait a year. It was give a presentation and then spend 12 months answering questions, having individual conversations, and really educating. Right. I think one of the first times I did a presentation, a cybersecurity presentation to our board, I had a lot of people come up to me afterwards and they said things like, um, man, that was really fantastic. That was really great. I didn't understand a lot of what you were talking about, but I never heard that type of information before. So thank you. And so what I did is I keyed off of that, and then I used that as an education program over that next couple of months to really, okay, well, you'd mentioned that you didn't fully understand this portion of the program. You certainly understand the cost of that program. So let me go through this now and show you where we're receiving tangible value, and kind of erase those. And so, yeah, I think the second time I did the presentation, there was a much better understanding, and I started getting questions of, oh, okay, now we understand that risk and we understand how you're mitigating that risk. So now show us where we're not mitigating risk, right? And so it's just this whole step level conversation in educating people around, how you're managing and then how you're assessing value to risk.
And how heightened would you say was the comparisons that you would get in terms of other industry players or other security incidents that become, major news? Is that something that your board would kind of grab onto or understand? Because it's tangible. It's in the headlines. It's in the emails that they get. Would you often get asked questions about, well, how are we protected? What does that look like? I think that's kind of the expectation or the norm today.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, I would get questions anytime there was a major event in the news, right? I would get questions about, hey, how are we protected against this specific threat? Um, and again, it was great because I didn't use that as okay, now I'm going to educate you on this. And hey, what do we have this? Or inevitably, our CEO would be on a plane with someone, right? And they would be talking about, oh, we can do this, this, and this. How are we doing against geolocation or, geo-blocking? Right. And I was like, oh, fantastic, great. You've been exposed to geo-blocking, and so now I'm going to explain on what we are doing to that. And so I think, I think any part of a good cybersecurity program has got to be focused around education, and not just the here, take a 3-question test every year so I can check a box and say that we've done this, right? It's again in that truly, if you have executives, have training that shows them how they can be targeted specifically, right? If it's a business email fraud, right? Train your accounting and your finance departments on how to specifically defeat those types of things. And because I'll tell you, when you do that kind of stuff, it's incredibly valuable to them, because no one wants to be a victim of a cybersecurity event, right? Um,
Now, as you have embarked on a new part of your career, you're taking on a new role, moving into infrastructure and operations, so shedding the security responsibility. Something that we are really focused on is helping security leaders, but business leaders in general, prepare for their first 90 days in a role. That's when you get your bearings, you kind of understand the lay of the land. And we find it's very, very common that that's when security leaders and business leaders are looking to partner with a trusted advisor in security, because that's when they really understand some of their gaps and they're looking for further assessment. What do your first 90 days look like? What are some of your tips, tricks, or recommendations for those first 90 days?
Yeah, I think I've answered the question a lot in the last couple of weeks now, but I think you got to put on your listening ears and really listen with a what is seeking to understand, right? And then really try to um, not make judgments or decisions, because especially with the type of personality that I have, is like I want to fix things. I want to solution things. So when someone brings something to me, I want to say, oh, well, we can do this, right? And I think, just seeking to listen, seeking to understand, really understanding what the entire landscape looks like, I think is super important, right? And then also, is it seeking out those people within an environment that can be mentors, right? That can and making sure you have a mix, right? You want a mix of people that have seen it all, and then you want a mix of people who are are also maybe have been there for 12 months, because especially with systems, right? We're all guilty of this, is we will form attachments with, well, I implemented this thing 6 years ago, and so I know that it's solid, right? Well, but you want to have the objectivity to be able to look at that and go, well, maybe it is solid, but we still should re-examine that and against the landscape today. And then if we still come back to that decision after we've really put some rigor around that, fantastic, great. But at least we didn't just rubber stamp something and say that it's good because I know I did that 6 years ago.
Very fair. Well, you might have just answered the next question I have, which is how does your background in security prepare you for this next step in your professional journey?
Yeah, I think it's almost like I think everybody should have a. It'd be nice if everybody had a background in cybersecurity, right? Because it's just applicable everywhere and in everything that we do. The amount of, in fact, my family probably gets tired of me talking about this. Is that I'll see them doing something, and whether it's online shopping or personal banking or whatever, and I'm imparting knowledge to them in regards to that because of my background in cyber. But I think it helps me to be a better partner to the individuals that are charged with doing, say, cybersecurity for my organization. And it helps me to understand and then help to translate to my teams how to partner with them better and truly partner with them, right? And be able to jump in the trenches in essence with them, and not just be on the other side of that trench throwing things across the aisle.
Yeah, nobody wants to be organizationally, the person, you don't want to be the no. You don't want to be the one breaking that momentum or, reducing scale. And I think sometimes in IT and cybersecurity, you feel like you can have that negative role, but it can really be a business enabler. So if you're already partnered and you understand and you're helping them on that journey of transformation, like that's a huge ally to have
Yeah.
organizationally.
Yeah. No, 100. And I agree with that statement 100%, as far as being a cyber is a business enabler for businesses, right? And, but it's only an enabler if you are proactive in that. If you are, because, no one if you're having to work behind the eight ball to fix something, that's much different than ferreting out those things in an environment and then being proactive before they become a problem. So I think that's why you lean on people that know vastly more than you do in those subjects, um, because you can catch that kind of stuff early.
Yeah. Fair. Well, maybe being proactive is going to be the answer to this, but let me ask you, now that you've left the cybersecurity space officially, what advice do you have for your peers, for those security leaders out there today? What advice would you give?
Mm. Um, it probably would be very similar to just, I guess general advice I would give from a business perspective, but it was that don't close yourself off to, we have the propensity to, I'm going to sit in a dark room and in front of four monitors and do my thing, which is great, and you have to do it, but engage with people, right? And engage with people who are not like you. Value really, I would say, gravitate towards diversity, right? Whether it's diversity of thought, any type of diversity, right? Because it just makes you better. It makes you better as a human being in general, but it makes you a better thinker, and not just cybersecurity people, right? And engage with the business, right? So and that person who you did an investigation on in the accounting department, right? Well, engage with the accountant, engage with them, and seek to understand what is the work that they do, right? So if you support a plant or you support someone in a machine shop, go understand the process that they're working through, right? That they take a USB key and they plug it into a machine and do something with it. And so when you put what could be perceived as onerous regulation around the use of a USB, understand how that impacts their work process, and then help them solution or work with the proper people to solution that, right? And actually be that business enabler. And so, because I think, especially in any form of technology, we tend to stay in our lanes, and I provide a service and I fix something, and we're not. We should be yes men in business. We should be trying to build that bridge to how to say yes and help make the company be more successful. So
I think you just gave the perfect pitch to every service provider out there that's ever existed, because that's exactly what we, as your partner, need to do. We talk about being, the authority in managed detection and response. We want to say yes to our customers. We want to help you enable, and we want to understand your business as well as you do. And I think that you just really set a phenomenal bar for what that looks like from an industry by industry perspective.
yeah,
That's
people will ask me to say, well, hey, what do you do? And really, no matter what role I've had in the last 20 years, it's that I help people. I help people. I help people with to be more successful in their careers, specifically in the use of technology. That's what I do.
I love that. Well, look, Michael, I have so enjoyed getting to know you over the last few years, and I really, really appreciate you sharing some of your leadership perspective and just your background with us. I think people will leave hearing you very motivated and very inspired. And I think that there's a lot people can take away from this. So thank you for your time today.
You are most welcome anytime.